It is a beautiful day here in the Chicago region, the heartland of America. And actually, if you're inclined to meditate and you get really quiet, you can hear America's heart thumping right beneath the surface. I think it's about 3 feet down, where those vibrations come through real clearly. So with spring at our doorstep and the thumping of the heart of America going on beneath us, it's almost rhythmic. You can tap your feet to the sound of the gestating plants and the thumping of the heart of America. How are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris. Yeah, enjoying that kind of change into warmth that we have here every spring, and yeah. So watching all the flowers grow has been really fun, and I'm listening to all the birds kind of come back and enjoy their environment even more too. So it's definitely a cheery kind of time of year.
It is. Yeah, we had some storms move through last night. I guess there were some tornadoes sighted peripherally around us, not close in, but nonetheless typical spring in the Midwest. And when the tornado warnings start going off, a lot of people fall to their knees and they start praying real hard. And prayer is a process of ascension. So today we're going to talk about the ladder of prayer.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful concept, and the way Jesus helps us to understand what prayer is, as we've been talking about these last few weeks. It's both this experience of the oneness of God, and it's the ladder that helps us to come into that knowing. So this section that we're going to be talking about today actually is called the ladder of prayer, and he talks about this progression that we make and how we can step into this more fully. So to jump right in, he says, prayer has no beginning and no end. It is a part of life, but it does change in form and grow with learning until it reaches its formless state and fuses into total communication with God. In its asking form, it need not, and often does not, make appeal to God or even involve belief in Him. At these levels, prayer is merely wanting out of a sense of scarcity and lack. So this level of prayer is really where most of us are. This needing, this wanting, whether we're asking God for things or we're asking the universe or we're just hoping and wishing that things were different or better in our life. That always comes from the sense of not enough within us. And that's what we're ultimately working on healing, so we can step out of that and into that deeper state of happiness.
Exactly, and there's a certain innuendo in this passage here that, since all of your thoughts are, to a degree, a supplication or a communication with God, even if you're saying, God, I hate you, get the hell away from me, it still is a part of this process of still being connected to the divinity that exists within you. And within that, unless you actually can come back to a place of silence, you're always broadcasting to God, and through the process of the mind, your beliefs about what your life is. So if you're sitting in traffic tomorrow and you're thinking, God, I hate this, and I'm miserable, and it's too hot, and the car's gonna run out of gas, and my supper's gonna be late when I get home and burned on the stove, all of that is creating a reality. That was a gift that God gave us, is that we have that power of creation. And so the unmonitored thinking, which is part of this category of prayer, is what is going to become manifest in our experience in life.
Yeah. So as we do this work, we do want to kind of get more, conscious of what it is that we are thinking. And we want to start to say, I want to choose thoughts of love and kindness, and start letting go of the thoughts of fear, lack, judgment, all of these thoughts of worry that you're talking about here, Chris. And this sorting out between the two different thought systems is something that takes time. And it's a process that we're all on. And what we realize at some point is the good thing is we don't need to sort out which is which. We just need to be willing to hand any of our questioning thoughts over to Spirit. And by handing them over, the ones that are based on truth will come back to us, and the ones that really have no basis in love or kindness, ultimately those will melt away and be undone. So I think this realization that we don't need to be the one to figure it out is really a sense of freedom, even though at first it might seem like we're giving something up because we know how we want things to be, and they better show up in our life the way that we want them to be. But as we shift beyond that, all of a sudden we get this sense of freedom and the sense of real happiness that comes along with that.
Exactly, and it is profoundly and distinctly different than what we have been taught that prayer is. When you start getting into that deeper level of realization, you almost cannot exist without being in the state of prayer. There are brief moments, perhaps, when you're in complete neutrality, when you're in that state of union without any kind of judgment or observation or thought about self is engaged. But this, you walk into the average Baptist church or Catholic church or basically any kind of religious or religious group, and offer this thought of prayer to them, and you're probably going to encounter a certain amount of hysteria, which is kind of actually not a bad thing every once in a while to stir up the pot. Anyway, in the second paragraph, it says, these forms of prayer, or asking out of need, always involve feelings of weakness and inadequacy, and could never be made by a son of God who knows who he is. So we're back to the issue of identity. Do we know who we are? No one, then, who is sure of his identity could pray in these forms. Yet it is also true that no one who is uncertain of his identity can avoid praying in this way. And prayer is as continual as life. Boy, that totally underlines that concept. Everyone prays without ceasing. Ask and you have received, for you have established what it is that you want. So if you want to be the weak and lame and the impoverished, keep saying, well, I'm weak, I'm lame, I'm impoverished, I'm damaged, I'm broken. And that's what you're going to see. That's the out picture. That's the result of that type of unmonitored and undisciplined inner dialogue. So the Course is really bringing it down to that level of you are the one who is the creator of your life experience.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that comes up for people a lot around this point is, hey, I don't want my life to be painful. I don't want suffering, and this sort of pushback against this idea that we're naming. And it might be that, yeah, we don't consciously want that. But one of the things that we're learning as we study the Course is that on a very deep level, we're attached to the idea of scarcity and separation. We're attached to this idea of an individual self that is the ego. And it's this level that we ultimately want to work on undoing. And this is what the forgiveness process is aimed at, because as we release this whole thought system of fear and judgment. What happens is it's automatically replaced by our truth, which is the thought of love, the thought of kindness, the thought of abundance, the thought of joy, the thought of beauty. So as we're doing this work within and we're noticing maybe any thoughts we have that are of scarcity or worry, and we're handing them over, we're ultimately undoing that deeper thought, which is this thought that somehow we can be attacked, somehow we are vulnerable, somehow we are weak, as this says, or inadequate. And we realize that we've never been weak or inadequate, that we have been ultimately one with what is strong, which is Jesus, which is God, which is oneness. And that that realization is really our sense of freedom. So, I think this is the shift that we're working on making, and looking at it through the lens of prayer becomes our way of saying, okay, I want to keep monitoring what's going on within me, and I want to keep making better and better choices, because I really want the good experiences that come from making choices of love and kindness.
Oh, very true. It's it is so simple and so visible in the actual process of life, and yet we put so much effort into hiding the truth and hiding its utter pure simplicity, that we engage in 99% of our efforts throughout the day to avoid actually confronting these ideas that we are the ones who are making our lives miserable.
Yeah. So, the sense of personal responsibility is a thing that, again, it's very empowering, even if it's something that we don't think oftentimes we want. Because when we get that we're responsible for everything that we think, there can be a sense of fear sometimes associated with that. Oh no, I had another fearful or worrying thought. What's going to come from that? And we don't want to create a fear around this. We want to actually create a sense of empowerment. So what this becomes is it's sort of like a training ground, where we're learning to train our mind. And in the beginning, just like if you were teaching someone to ride a bike, you'd have the training wheels on. And as you got further, you could take those off. Well, in the beginning, it's okay if we make some mistakes. You could think of Spirit as kind of helping to be our training wheels. So we're not going to fall off the bike. We're going to keep practicing and getting how this whole bike thing works before we're asked to kind of, progress into these higher levels. And I think that there's this sort of progression too that happens with prayer and with being aware of what we're going into. So I think this next paragraph helps us to start to move up that ladder, and see how it is we can make this progress. Jesus shares here, it is also possible to reach a higher form of asking out of need. For in this world, prayer is reparative, and so it must entail levels of learning. Here the asking may be addressed to God in honest belief, though not yet with understanding. A vague and usually unstable sense of identification has generally been reached, but tends to be blurred by a deep-rooted sense of sin. So again, we're moving in the right direction, but we still have this attachment to fear. It is possible at this level to continue to ask for things of this world in various forms, and it is also possible to ask for gifts such as honesty or goodness, and particularly for forgiveness for the many sources of guilt that inevitably underlie any prayer of need. Without guilt, there is no scarcity. The sinless have no needs. So you can again see how he's sort of progressing us along. So we're starting to move out of this idea of scarcity, but there's still some belief in us that we think that we have wants, that we have something real that we need here that will complete us or make us happy. And eventually we're going to move beyond that to the state of knowing that we already have everything, that nothing could be lacking or in want. But that again is more like the culmination of the ladder of prayer. So we're on our way to that. But on these other steps on the ladder, it's important to just kind of recognize that it's progress. We've already made the step up from where we started, but we want to keep on going.
Very true. And part of this journey also is to get to a point where you have that realization that the voice that is telling you what you are thinking, the voice that is defining, oh, I just had a bad thought, that sort of thing, is always ongoing. That's the voice of the ego. And the ego really has no power unless you stop and allow it to embed itself within you. So rather than resisting when that ego voice says, oh man, did you ever screw up, there, and that thought is going to really show up and bite you in the ass in about 24 hours here, you have to learn how to not resist that, to look at it and just watch it pass through you, because the ego is also going to try to seduce you. The ego that is its nature. It is the worst imagined lover that you have ever had. And you literally have had it from birth. So you're going to have to start taking some very solid steps toward liberating yourself from that relationship, which is somewhat enigmatic in itself. You have to detach yourself from the relationship that you have with your false self.
Yeah, but just like some of those not very healthy relationships, you're going to try to leave, and then you're going to go back to it. You're going to oh wait, why did I go back to this relationship again? You kind of have to keep practicing and keep letting go. So I like that analogy.
Yeah, it is very confounding at times. It's very frustrating at times. But the thing is to don't fall into that temptation to resist it. Just be as transparent as possible. Watch it go right through you. And 24 hours from now, you won't have even a scant memory of what had happened. So it is a little bit of a tricky process getting on that first rung and then the second rung of the prayer ladder. But with a little bit of mindfulness, you can make it work. So paragraph 4 here says, at this level also comes that curious contradiction in terms known as praying for one's enemies. The contradiction lies not in the actual words, but rather in the way in which they are usually interpreted. While you believe you have enemies, you have limited prayer to the laws of this world. And you have also limited your ability to receive and to accept to the same narrow margins. And yet, if you have enemies, you have need of prayer, and great need too. What does the phrase really mean? Pray for yourself that you may not seek to imprison Christ and thereby lose the recognition of your own identity. Be traitor to no one, or you will be treacherous to yourself. And, that goes back to when Jesus was making a strong point about, every time you feed the poor, every time you nurture the sick, every time you give alms to the beggar in the street, whenever you do something and you recognize that you're doing it for the Christ within, and that you're helping to remove the shell of your beliefs about who that person is, then you are doing it for Jesus. Then you're fulfilling that commandment that he had, because if you do this for the least of these, you have done it for me. So this is a very, very, very powerful part of this whole process of awakening to what prayer is.
Yeah, and it's very connected to this idea of oneness, and to realize that we are all one. Because when we see that everyone is actually one with us, then we actually want to be kind. We want to see the beauty and the truth in them, as opposed to even if they're acting out or behaving in a way that doesn't seem very loving, we can see that underneath that pain that they're expressing, there is that same Christ that's in all of us. And if we can make that shift within our minds to help see that Christ, to help to know that light that's already there, all of a sudden our experience of life starts to change. We realize that everyone here is really either asking for help, asking for kindness, or they're expressing it. And it really becomes that simple. And then all we have to do as we go through our days in our life is to practice living that kindness and compassion. Now, I'm not saying that's easy, but it's simple because it means we only really have one purpose here. And that purpose is to come to see the truth that's within ourselves as well as within everyone that we meet.
Yeah, it's it's not, again, it's not complex. It is the easiest and simplest thing to do when you are in your right mind. But when you are in your ego mind, you have 10 million reasons for not living in this state of awareness, in this state of comfort, in this, in this place where, as the Course tells us, you need do nothing. There's no effort. It is an effortless existence. So it's getting back to that state of being and being as true to your core self, your Christ self, as you can possibly be.
Yeah. So this is why, as we talk about these concepts, we're really talking about awakening. Because this whole ego belief system is like the veil of a dream that's fallen in front of our mind. And I say in front of our mind because everything that we're experiencing here is actually coming from the level of mind. And as we're moving into these higher levels of prayer, we're actually talking about realizing that everything that's happening here in our world is actually a dream. And just like in the state of lucid dreaming, we come to this place where we are seeing that what's happening around us is not really happening. We can start to have that experience here within this physical world of time and space, the dream world that we're living in our daily life. And it starts to change our experience. We were talking a little bit before this video about some of the crazy stuff that's happening politically in the country. And the relief that comes from realizing that, that's not true. Like there's really no reality to that. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't engage and we don't do what feels appropriate or helpful or kind in this situation, but it changes our perspective and it changes how we feel about what's unfolding, so that we can come from a place of love and kindness. And the truth of the matter is, if we're coming from that place of love and kindness, we are going to act in a loving and kind way. And that really is what matters. That, it doesn't really matter so much what's happening. It always matters how we're living our life. And that's the goal that we have here is how can I live a life of love and kindness so that I can awaken to this truth that's in me as well as within everyone that we meet.
Very true. And one of the great temptations as we're out in the world and we have our beliefs that are based on our observations, that are based on the media and the gossip and the hearsay and he said, she said, is that we come to a point within our ego where we recognize or we believe ourselves to be illuminated. Oh, I know what's going on. And then it's very easy for us to take the next step of looking around and the first person that's out of line saying, oh, here, let me help you. You're not seeing the world correctly. You just have this tiny mote in your eye. So we really have to withdraw from that tendency to allow the ego to express itself through us in a way of criticizing or trying to correct the people around us. I think you're much better off to just chill out and Ride it out if you're frustrated with what's going on in your environment. Forgive it and release it. And if you are supposed to say something or do something, it will come from that deeper place within you. So that's that immediate response situation that we all find ourselves in over and over again is something that we really have to be able to back out of so that we don't make things worse rather than better.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the trickier parts of this whole thing is catching ourselves, because the mind, we have such a habit of kind of going into our fear, going into our judgment, going into guilt and blame, that that it almost feels automatic. So noticing when we start to go in that direction, and as you're saying, Chris, to say, no, I don't need to do that. I don't have to make that choice this time. Maybe I want to choose something different and align myself with joy and peace instead. That becomes our practice, and that's why we call this whole thing as a spiritual practice, because we just keep practicing. And when you've been working on this for maybe even a few years, you start to say, wow, I'm just practicing the same thing. I'm just practicing the same idea over and over. And we start to kind of incorporate into our lives. I sometimes describe the mind as a bit of a sponge. And the reason that it's helpful to actually repeat these ideas again and again is just like a sponge, it needs to kind of soak in whatever water it's sitting in. Our mind sort of soaks up these ideas and they go deeper and deeper. And we find it easier and easier to actually live our life from these principles. Whereas in the beginning, maybe it was, a lot intellectual of ideas, but were we actually embodying them and bringing them into this world that we experience? Then over time, the answer is yes. I can live from this place, and we just kind of keep going forward. So we keep expanding the amount of our life that we use these principles in, and eventually that becomes 100%, and that is the time of our awakening. So we just need to keep persisting and moving forward with these ideas, and that's one of the most important things.
And it's one of the most tedious things. It's a very arduous task. So you get into that thing of 2 minutes later, you realize, oh, damn, I just opened my mouth when I should have just been watching. And that just happens repeatedly throughout the day. But it is a journey for reclaiming your true self and your true nature, which is that you are in control of your mind. And even by living in a state of ego-aggrandized madness, you still are in control of your mind to the degree that you are willing to allow your mind to run naked and insane through the woods.
I was wondering what my mind was doing.
There you go. It's out there in Burnham Woods, getting ready to howl at the moon.
Oh yes, the werewolf part of me, it's out.
There you go. Well, we've managed to get through the first 4 paragraphs of this section, and so maybe we can pick up with paragraph 5 next week.
Sounds good, yeah. And we are working on putting together an in-person event, so we'll keep you posted on that, but that will probably be happening sometime soon. And yeah, hope everyone is enjoying the day wherever they are as they're watching this, and yeah, glad that you spent some time with us.
Absolutely. It was definitely a nice way to begin the day, and now we can go out and frolic and enjoy those spring flowers. And we do appreciate the fact that we've had 2 viewers riding the waves with us here, and we'll be surfing in 1 week. So join us. Bring your surfboard and join us in the water. The water's so nice and warm.
All right. Well, you have a great day, Chris, and I'll talk to you next week.
Sounds perfect. Bye.
Bye.